5 months old, had frozen to death. He was one of 5 children who froze to death that week. I think it was in January. This is an aspect of the Dahiya doctrine, which is demoralization, to wear the civilian population down so they no longer support the resistance, particularly the armed resistance of the Al-Qassam brigades and the various factions in the Gaza Strip. It's a psychological war. I met with the Shamali family, the parents of Salam Shamali. Many of you know who he was. He was 22 years old. He was at 22 or 23. He was a vendor in Shujai. He was executed on camera by an Israeli sniper during the war. And when I was talking to his father, and the family was just shaken by this incident and by the overall terror of the war. I mean, the war was ongoing, and his father told me that his children were making, I think the word is amanat, like last dying wishes, that his children were all suicidal. Say it.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to translate into English, I've learned. And it's hard to relay the mindset to an American audience. But you're seeing a psychological condition that hasn't been present in the Gaza Strip before, particularly among the youth who have seen, over 50% of the population of the Gaza Strip is under 18. Substantial number of that percentage of that population is under age 8, which means they've spent their whole life living under the terror of the Dahiya doctrine. They are what the philosopher Giorgio Agamben would call homo sacer, or bare life. Life that can be switched off with the push of a button. And I mean this in a literal sense. The first thing you see, and you guys know this, when you go into the Gaza Strip through Erez, and you look to your right, is a remote-controlled machine gun pointed into the buffer zone. It is part of the spot and strike system operated by an all-female unit of the Israeli army kilometers away in the Negev desert. They monitor the buffer zone, and if they see someone whose gait, whose walking style, matches that of what they consider to be a terrorist, they push the button and eliminate them. That's also complementary with the drone policy, the policy of drones, which are now part of the permanent sonic ambience of the Gaza Strip. A friend of mine, Jihad Saftawi, commented that he wouldn't be comfortable hearing his wife's voice without a drone behind it. That's the reality. Let me just move forward, since I have very little time. I want to just put the current situation in the context of Hafradah. Liberal Zionists misunderstood Hafradah as a pretext for 2 states, for Palestinian sovereignty and a resolution of the situation. That's not what it was about. It's about a one-state reality with Kalandia in the center of it. And when you have Kalandia in the center of a binational apartheid state, in which one ethno-religious group has all the rights, East Jerusalem becomes the center of Palestinian resistance. The institutions of life, the institutions of Palestinian nationalism, since Hafradah has been put in place in East Jerusalem, have been completely eliminated, starting with Orient House. What is the only institution left? What is the only recognizable symbol of Palestinian nationalism in Jerusalem now? It's Al-Aqsa. And that's why it's the center of the rebellion that we're seeing right now. And who is rebelling? It's the generation that's grown up under Hafradah. It's the generation of 13 to 28, the Oslo generation, who have very little connection to or support for established political factions. They see them as exploitative, and they are trying to reclaim an agency that's been deprived of them by lashing out at their occupier, particularly inside the Green Line. And who can get inside the Green Line now? It's mainly Palestinian residents of Jerusalem. By doing so, they are making a statement that peace without peace, which has been Netanyahu's policy, a one-way peace, is not possible. They're puncturing that psychological security that Israelis in Tel Aviv have enjoyed. The On the other side, just to conclude, we've seen, and if you look at Israeli Democracy Institute polls, you look at a poll that just came out yesterday of religious nationalist Israelis, which show that 3/4 favor ethnically cleansing Palestinian citizens of Israel who are Muslim out of Israeli territory, that 80% boycott Arab businesses inside Israel, etc. If you look at these polls, you see a steady rise in racist attitudes, belligerent attitudes, and what the Israeli social psychologist, political psychology professor and trauma studies expert Daniel Bartal refers to as Masada syndrome. Masada being the, I believe, the 2nd century AD Roman era fortress of Jewish fanatics, or Sicarii, in the words of the Jewish historian Josephus. The Latin translation is terrorists or bandits who committed mass suicide. And that's what I think of when I see Jews attacking Jews who resemble Palestinians, and we've been seeing that bear out. From the Dawabsha, the burning of the Dawabsha family, to the comments of Deputy Defense Minister Eli Ben-Dahan that Palestinians are subhuman, to Netanyahu's remarks about the Palestinians being responsible, or the Palestinian national struggle bearing the spiritual legacy of Nazi Germany and actually being responsible for convincing Hitler to commit the Holocaust. Hitler just was following orders, according to Netanyahu. We are seeing an escalation, not only in incitement, but in vigilantism, the kind of vigilantism which has been traditionally present in places like H2 and Hebron, which were given over to radical settlers, creeping into mainstream Israeli society, into Israeli core cities. And this is part of the settler strategy. Not only to march through the institutions, they now control the Shin Bet, they control the Israeli police force, they have, for the first time, religious nationalists in the Supreme Court. Bill talked about their influence on Gaza policy. It's also to control the street. That's why we are seeing what we're seeing, the story that we're seeing, the history that we're seeing play itself out. It's being illustrated through snuff films. Films of an Eritrean refugee having his lifeless body trounced by a crowd. Films of pathetic films of a Palestinian woman who attempted a knife attack at Afula being gunned down in a kind of circular firing line. These are illustrations of Zionism in its terminal phase. Avigdor Lieberman, the former foreign minister, I see time. I'll tell you what time it is. Hold on. It's 4:12. Avigdor Lieberman, the former foreign minister, has said that another operation in Gaza is inevitable. He predicts that there will be another operation next summer. Who can imagine what this operation will look like? Bombing rubble with 5,000-pound bunker buster bombs. How do you? What's left to bomb? The issue, actually, with Gaza and the next operation, considering all the factors that I've laid out, the psychological sensibility of the leadership of Israel, the political realities, is that Netanyahu finds himself, as extreme as he is, telling Israelis who are, trouncing on, gunning down kids with potato peelers that they're actually inglorious bastards, curb-stomping Nazis in the woods outside Krakow. The issue is that Netanyahu finds himself at the hollow center of Israeli politics, and that the pressure on him from the right wing is so enormous that any fanaticism that he can muster is going to rise to the surface just to hold off his right flank. And those to his right, Naftali Bennett, the Justice Minister, the acting Foreign Minister, Tzipi Hotovely, Eli Ben-Dahan, who's in charge of the occupied territories, this fanatic, are all calling for a conquest of the Gaza Strip, for marching on Gaza City, just as Netanyahu's mentor, Menachem Begin, was pressured by Ariel Sharon to march on Beirut. The consequences of that would be devastating. It would be a miniature Stalingrad, and that is possible. What we'll see in the meantime is the new normal, a very intimate, low-level, and extremely gruesome civil war. I worry that we're moving from a South Africa-style scenario to an Algeria scenario. And that is a challenge for everyone in this room. Thanks.